the workflow in Xcode for creating playgrounds or console applications, creating iOS apps using storyboards with Interface Builder, but the latest, newest technology is to create apps with the interface being done in SwiftUI. Now, SwiftUI is a programmatic way of creating the interface, and that gives you more control, it gives the developer more control. It's really, I think, advantageous when you're wanting to create things for multiple devices, an iPad and an iPhone, or you want to be able to switch between portrait and landscape. And I've always found the way of doing that within storyboards was difficult. It was clunky. You had to do these constraints that oftentimes didn't want to behave with each other, to rearrange your interface as you rotated the device from portrait to layout, or as you moved from an iPhone to an iPad. Programmatically, it seems like it's much easier to do that because we can use our programming code and conditional statements to look at what type of device, what the orientation is, and be able to change those things with much more control using our Swift code. There's also the issue of the notch that is in iPhone X and beyond, that little black rectangle that extends down from the top. And so we want to also be able to look at the version that we're using of the iOS operating system and move things lower so we're not having to deal with the notch. And one of the cool things I think about Swift is you can add different effects, such as you can blur things and you can add mask. If you want to have an image be round or circular, you can add a mask to that image pretty easily. So I'm going to walk you through the workflow of creating an app using SwiftUI, and we'll do the same project we did before with the circle calculator. Let's go to Xcode. I'm going to open up Xcode, and we're going to start a new project. And again, it's going to be for iOS platform. We're going to create an app. I'm going to click Next. I'm going to call this one Circle Calculator. SwiftUI. We have our team, our reverse URL for the organization. For interface, we want to make sure we choose SwiftUI and not Storyboard. And we'll leave the lifecycle as UIKit app delegate. Our language, of course, is Swift. I'm going to click Next. Oh, by the way, in the previous video, I created a project starting with 00, being that was going to be kind of pre-class the first week. And so I wanted to name my project starting with numbers. And with SwiftUI, as I discovered, that creates problems with the previewer. So I always want to start your project name with a letter. Okay, choose where to save it. I'm going to click Create. And let me zoom this full screen. So Xcode doesn't look a whole lot different at first, but if you look at the navigator panel, you'll notice we no longer have a main.storyboard, and there's no longer a viewcontroller.swift file. Those have both been replaced with the content view.swift. And that is our code over here that's being showed. And the code that's created for us by default is a very simple interface with the typical Hello World label. The second editor also comes up as a previewer of the interface. And right now it says automatic preview updating pause, and there's a resume button. So I'm going to click resume. And we're going to see it display over here our interface in what sort of looks like an emulator. It's really just a previewer. And there is our interface with Hello World. Now, what we're seeing here visually is depicting our code. So if I come over to my code and change world to SMCC, you'll notice that changes. Now, everything here is being done programmatically based on the code, and you'll see there's some padding here. I could add in, I could create another line here and do a dot font, and we'll just do dot system and then parentheses, I'm going to say size, colon, 22, and I'm going to make the weight dot bold. And you'll notice my font now is a little bit larger and it's bold. Now on the padding, I can also make some modifications here. And in square brackets, I can say I want to pad the top, the leading, and the trailing. It's going to be the top, left, and right. I'm going to set that to 10. And I misspelled leading. There we go. So now I'm getting 10 units on the left and right and the top. And if I change that, say, to 20, you'll see that also reflected. So everything I do here is being reflected in the previewer. Now, you've seen the ease of adding things to our interface visually with the library in the storyboard, and we can still do that here. So I'm going to open up the library, and I'm going to come down and choose a label, and I'm going to bring a label over to my screen, and notice I can position it in relation to what's already there. I'm going to put it below my text field there, and it adds it to my code. And you notice we get the name of the label, or the text being displayed in the label, and then a system image by default. And I'm just going to, we can get rid of the system image. I'm going to do it over here in the inspector panel. So I'm just going to highlight through that, and I'm going to change the code here. Just like we used the inspector panel before the storyboard. And I'll just put my name in as the developer. Now I can do some changes here in terms of padding in the frame. There's also a whole bunch of modifiers here. I can click in the list in the add modifiers and get a listing of all the different modifiers. And if I add something, it will appear in this list. So before in the storyboard, we had all the different attributes and you had to kind of wade through them. In this case with SwiftUI, you only get the stuff that's been applied. And I could choose one of these. Maybe I want to add a shadow. So I can choose shadow. And now I get shadow here in my code, and I can make modifications either there or in the panel. I'm not sure why I've got this loading. Oh, there we go. So I can make some modifications here. I can increase that shadow, and as I do that, it changes it over here in the code. If I want to get rid of it, I can just press the delete key, and that will remove that item from the code. Same way, I can come over to the code, and I can just simply type a period, and I get all those different modifiers here. So I can choose shadow here as well and apply that. And as I do that, notice it pops over here in the inspector. I also want to point out that when we added the label, it put it inside of vertical stack or a V stack. So it creates the support structures that are needed for the display. So that's how we work with SwiftUI. Now let's change this so that we have our circle calculator. And I'm going to change, what I'm going to do here, I think I'm going to get rid of the shadow. I didn't really want that. So we'll delete that. I'm going to bring up my library again, and let's add another label. I'm going to put this label up here. I can add it to the code, or I can add it to the previewer, either way. So I want this label to say circle calculator. So again, I'm just going to come over here. It's usually easier to do this in the inspector than in the code sometimes. So we'll say circle calculator. I want to get rid of that little system image that's there by default. I'm going to copy my font designator or modifier and add that in here. And I really don't want the text. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. But, you know, I'm going to keep the padding as well. So I'm just going to copy that. And it doesn't matter the order that you put things in as far as the modifiers. But let's get rid of this. So now we have two labels inside that vertical stack. I do want to make my font much smaller on the develop by. So again, I'm just going to I'm going to copy the font, and let's set this size to 16, and I don't want the bold, so I can just get rid of that. I do need another parenthesis though that I accidentally deleted. So now I'm going to add another label. This one's going to be below my title. You can think about building this thing as in a stack going from top to bottom. This label, I want it to say enter diameter. I'll add a colon after that. Again, I'm going to get rid of the system image. I'll add in the same font information. Let's also do a dot padding here. And I'm going to do a dot top and a dot bottom. And let's do about 20. Okay, now I want to have a text field that they can enter into. Okay, I'm going to get a text field and add the text field to the right of my label. And notice when I did that, these two now are inside a horizontal stack that's inside the vertical stack. There's a placeholder, and for the placeholder, I'm again just going to say, I'll just put in diameter. So we know it should go in there, and I'm going to do padding all the way around, and we'll do about 40 units. I'm going to set the frame width, and I want my size to be 100 units. Not worried about the height. And that'll bring it in from the margin. So now we have this nice little text box here. I want to have some text in there to start with. Now let me point out one thing about using SwiftUI. Notice all this is inside a structure or a struct. And a struct is a value type. It contains one or more variables or fields, just like a class would. It could even contain methods, and we'll probably add some methods here in a little bit. Usually a struct has one instance, whereas a class might have multiple instances. And I want to add or be able to put some text in here and have the user enter some text. So inside the struct, we're going to create a state. Now the state allows us to move this value out from the struct into our random access memory. Make it more accessible. So it's going into shared storage. But otherwise, it's like creating a variable. In fact, I am creating a variable, so it's going to be var, private var, and I'm going to have a variable called diameter. It's going to be a string. And I'm going to set it equal to 20. So looking back at our code, you'll notice that we have text field with a placeholder of diameter, and the text is value. I'm going to change that value to be $diameter. That's going to go get that state value of 20 and put it into our text field. Now you notice at this point my previewer here has pause. I'm going to click the resume button again. You have to kind of watch that. And you'll notice now we get 20 as the value that's in our text field. Let me hide my library for now. So I want to change the alignment on this so the number's on the right. I can just type a dot align and see everything that's modifiers as a line. And so you don't have to necessarily memorize all this stuff. You can use the help system here. What I want is multi-line text alignment. And right now it's dot leading. I'm going to change that to dot trailing. I can also choose how I want this aligned here in the inspector panel. So we got leading, center, and trailing. I also want to change the background color. And I'm going to set it as a light yellow. We'll add a border of color dot black. And on our app, if they use the keyboard that's part of the phone or part of the device, I want to use the numeric keyboard. So I can choose keyboard type. And over here, then I get my types, and what I want is the number pad. Okay, so now I want a button. I'm going to tighten my code up here. We got some blank lines, so I'm going to get rid of those blank lines. I'm watching my curly brackets. So there's an opening curly bracket here for the horizontal stack and another one here to end that horizontal stack. I'm going to bring up my library. Let's put this up here at the top. I'm going to drag a button into the area after that horizontal stack. And we can code an action. Now here I'm going to put the action inside of curly brackets, and we'll learn more how to do all of this as the semester progresses. I just really want to show you the flow. So we're going to say calc circle. It's going to be the name of our method we're going to create. And so I need a pair of parentheses. Now right now it can't find calc circle. We haven't written that yet. And then for content, I'm going to type text, and then inside the parentheses, in quotes, calculate. Now because of the error here, it's not showing that display, so I'm going to come down to the second to last curly bracket within my struct. By the way, notice there's also another struct here. This is the content previewer. It is this code that allows the previewer to work. So be careful you don't get rid of that. But let's go ahead and create a function here. And I want to create that calc circle function. And we'll come back and add some code a little bit later. But now that function exists, and it makes that error go away. Okay, I'm going to come back here and try again on the previewer. So I forgot one step here. This is why the previewer is not working. It doesn't like the light yellow because I haven't defined what light yellow is. It's not one of the named colors. And I'm going to go into the assets catalog where we created our graphics earlier. I'm going to click the plus sign down here, and I'm going to add in a color set. And let's name this light yellow. And then I can come into any appearance, and I can change my colors. So I'm just going to bring the blue down a little bit. Give me a light yellow there. I'm going to say that's good, and I'm going back to my content view.swift. And now let's see if that updates. I'm going to save my project, but I also need to come in here probably and build the project so it's going to get that light yellow from the assets catalog. Still not coming up. Let me double check. I didn't misspell something. Make it a little bit darker yellow. And we'll try to resume. There we go. So now it's yellow. Now for my button, I want to do some padding on it as well. So I'm going to say padding. And if I want to pad all the way around, I showed you can do top, leading, trailing, bottom. We can also do .all. And if we do .all, it does not need to be in square brackets. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to do 10 units all the way around. And again, we'll change the background color here. I'm going to do color.blue. So there's a few named colors in here. You don't have to necessarily create the basic colors in the assets catalog, but anything out of basically blue, red, black, green, yellow, orange, you're going to need to create the shades that you want. I'm also going to set the foreground here, and this one is foreground color, as I can see in the IntelliSense. I call it IntelliSense. It's actually a Microsoft term. I mostly program in C#, so I use the name IntelliSense. And this is going to be color.white. Once again, I'm going to resume. And then we see it applies the colors. We got our background, blue, white, and then the padding of 10 all the way around. Okay, so now I'm going to add a text. And I'll put that underneath our button. And have the text be output. But I'm going to create another state variable. That will be named output. It's going to be a string. And it's going to say enter the diameter. Click the calculate button. The circumference and area will be shown here. So I have an error here in that I used I typed a semicolon rather than a colon. See if that clears everything up. It does. Down here in the text, I want to change this outputs in quotes. I want to get rid of those quotes. Let's resume. And there is my output variable. I'm going to add some padding for leading and trailing. And I want these to be 25. And I want that to be applied to the text box. I didn't have the text box selected. I'm going to add that there. I'm glad I pasted it or copied and pasted it though, because I want to do it again. But this time, let me change this to vertical, which would be the top and the bottom. Let's make that 10. So we can do multiple statements of padding to pad different sides a different amount. And again, we'll just add a font designation here, so we can change the font size. Probably in most cases, you want to use the system font, which is San Francisco Pro. and our size will be 16. Now I want to bring everything up towards the top. So here's the little trick with that. We can add a spacer object. And the spacer object then takes up as much space as it needs to, and it pushes everything up. So I'm going to bring one more view into my project, and that's going to be the image. I'm going to go to the library, find my image view. I'm going to add the image view below the spacer. And for image, that's mean for image name. I need to bring those 3 resolutions of the circle image into assets. I'm going to go to assets. I'm going to not have my screen be full screen for Xcode, and then open up the Finder. And there are my 3 images. I'm going to drag those over to create that asset of the 3 different resolutions. Okay, we're going to take this back to full screen. Go back to content view. I'm going to click on the image name here, and now I can come up here and type circle calc. Now, once again, it's not showing because I need to rebuild my project so it knows that that information is in the assets catalog. So we'll go to product. We're going to go to build. We're going to try again for our previewer. Get rid of that blank line in there. So my circle is really too big. It's kind of pushing everything else out of the way. So I need to resize that. So I'm going to add a couple properties here. One is going to be dot resizable. So that basically puts it into the space, but I need to change the aspect ratio. So there is a modifier for aspect ratio. And the content mode right now is fill. I can go over here and change that to fit. Then perhaps I'm going to add some padding, and I'll just do 20 all the way around. So there's my interface. I need to still code that calculate button. Not much different here than we did before. I'm going to take a variable of r of type double equals the double value of diameter. I'm going to unwrap that with an exclamation mark and divide that by 2.0. We'll let area equal. And I'm just going to use r times r to make r squared times double dot pi. We'll let circum equal the double value of diameter. Again, I'll unwrap that. And we're going to multiply that by double dot pi. I'm going to create a variable of prompt. It's going to be a string, and it's going to equal circumference equals, and we'll interpolate format colon, and I want this to be 2 decimals. 0.2f in quotes, and the value I want to put there is circum. And 2 parentheses and my closing quote. Now notice I'm getting an error here on can't find double.py. Go ahead and import UI kit. Also getting an error on that extra quote I have there. Let me just rebuild and see what happens here. So again, we'll go to product, we'll build. Okay, it still is not liking that double.py. And it's showing it there, so let me just try this again. Oh, I see what the error is here. I've got it double misspelled. There we go. So I don't think we actually need the import UI kit in that case. Get rid of that. Okay, we're getting a warning here on area because we haven't used that. But my error on the pi is no longer there. So now we'll take prompt plus equal. In quotes, I'll do a new line character. Area equals, and we'll interpolate, again, string format. And once again, I want to use 2 decimal places, so 0.2f. And what I want to display here is area. And then finally, I want to say output equals prompt. I clicked the try again button in the previewer to make sure there weren't any errors for the interface, that nothing else is coming up. It looks good. Right now, I'm going to run this in my emulator. And I'll use the iPhone 8 Plus. And let's test it. Notice when I chose the device here, it changed the previewer for that device as well. But it's now launching the emulator. And you can watch this here up at the top as far as what's happening, and also down here at the bottom as well. So now it brought up the debug panel. Go back to the emulator. If you want to kind of see both of those, again, the trick here is not have Xcode be full screen. So that way, if you're doing some print statements, something you want to see what's the debugger is doing, you can watch the information at the bottom. Okay, so it's loaded into our project. We have 20 as the diameter. Notice I could change that if I wanted. I'm just going to click the calculate button. And I get circumference is 0.2f and area is 0.2f. So I got a little problem with my code. Let's go back and take a look. So I'm going to stop that running. And what I forgot is there should be a percent sign in front of my format designations. Okay, so we're going to try this again. Reload it back to the emulator. And now I'm getting circumference is 62.83. That'd be about right. 20 times 3.14. And the area, radius is 10. Squared is 100. 100 times 3.14 is going to give me 314.16. So our project is working, same as we did before, but with this time we did it with Storyboard, with SwiftUI rather than Storyboard. Now that might seem a little clunky to you in terms of using the storyboards, and at this stage it probably is, but the more you use SwiftUI, the easier it would get for you. You'll learn all the different ins and outs, as I still am. And if you wanted to develop things for different platforms, I think SwiftUI, meaning iPad, iPhone, different types of devices, different resolutions, I think you're going to find SwiftUI is going to be a better option. So most of the projects we do in this course, you can do with storyboards, and that's the way we've set them up. We have a SwiftUI project at the end, but if you want to play around with SwiftUI, you can use SwiftUI on any of the projects and assignments in this course. I'll try to do some more videos along the way of how I might take one of the projects we have shown in Storyboard and how I would do it with SwiftUI. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the iOS app development cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.